from that came a friendship, most of which has taken place over the phone, and I was privileged to help her a little bit with her book. So this is
He sent it to the publisher, and they decided to publish it. It's because of Alan Rody that this book is
But just by way of introduction, the book is really about a life so well lived. And when I first read Nancy's first pass of the manuscript, I said, Nancy, you have lived the life, and it really transcends the movies, Sunset Boulevard, Pollyanna, Absent-Minded Professor, all the movies that we love and we love her in, but it's just an extraordinary life. So with that, let me present to you the one, the only Nancy Olson.
Let me also just comment on that. If you live a very long time, even when you are born into very good fortune, as I was, I had two very educated parents. My father was a doctor, my mother was a school teacher, retired, and I lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at a time when there were not as many people in the world. Life was simpler. And we had a beautiful house on a lake in northern Wisconsin where I spent every summer. But when you live, even with that kind of wonderful beginning, if you live a very, very long time, you cannot not experience tragedy, failure, success, notoriety, sadness, disappointment, fabulous happiness, reward, everything. You cannot escape it all. And that's, I think, in the book. I'm as truthful as I know how to be. And by the way, that's very Midwestern, especially.
This is the wholesome Olson part.
Yes. My nickname in college was Wholesome Olson. And by the way, I think that's why Billy Wilder pursued me on the lot. I was a starlet. I was a student at UCLA. And he kept, I was walking along to the commissary, and he would catch up with me and say, Nancy, wait a minute, I want to talk to you. And he would ask me about growing up in Milwaukee. He would ask me about what UCLA was like, what being the daughter of a doctor was like. And what he was looking for was that character, Betty Schaefer, who had a kind of honest ambition. She wanted to be a writer. Well, you had to sound fairly educated in order to believe that. And so he was fascinated and kept after me about what seemed to me insignificant kind of material, but it was important to him. And when he cast me, Edith Head, who was the head of the wardrobe department at the company, she was wonderful, and she was a wonderful person, by the way. But she started putting things together for me to wear, and Billy and I both looked at her and said, that's not Betty Schaefer. So Billy said, I like what Nancy had on the other day when she was visiting the set. So I wore all my own clothes. And by the way, I did not have a great wardrobe. I didn't have time to shop. I was from Milwaukee. I had transferred from University of Wisconsin to UCLA. And so I didn't know where to shop, literally. And I hate the word but.
However,
to be simply me. And it's interesting, isn't it?
Nancy,
I did not know that he was asking me all these questions. I thought he was just a very interesting, incredible director and writer and producer, and that he had a sensibility about the world that was very special. But I played an Indian in color, a Canadian Pacific, and I'm a Scandinavian. And I called them at the studio, in the talent department, because they gave me this assignment that I was going to go to Paramount to 20th Century Fox. And what's his name, the lead? Randolph Scott was 2 years younger than my father. And I'm playing a half Indian Canadian girl. And I said, do I look Indian?
only in Hollywood.
And they said, don't worry, your hair is going to be, I had a kind of dark blonde hair, but in the summer, it would literally have white streaks. And they said, they're going to dye your hair very, very dark every morning, and your blue eyes, you're part Canadian. So forget it. They want you. I learned a lot, actually. It was important.
When you got on the set of Sunset Boulevard, I mean, the cast, really legendary cast of characters. And let's start with Bill Holden, because that was, as they decrypt from Casablanca, the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Yes.
Although Bill did make an effort one time to be more than that, it kind of turned into a joke, really.
Well, I think that every leading man, first of all, there's an intimacy that is, you cannot deny when you are working closely together and supposedly falling in love with each other. There is an intimacy that is there that you don't experience in your everyday life, but you do when you're making films. So there was an interest from him in me. And he said one evening, at the end of shooting, he said, Nancy, we've got this big scene tomorrow. Would you stop at my dressing room on the way before you drive home, and let's look at tomorrow's work? And I said, okay, great. And so I arrived at the dressing room, and there it was with low music in the background, a ice bucket with white wine, and I thought, oh. And I said, Bill, I'm so tired, it's such a long day. We'll be fine, I really have to leave. And I was very nice about it, and he was very nice about it, and he never, ever, ever did it again. But we had an affection for each other. You cannot kiss and hug and fall in love without feeling something special. I love the way he helped. I love the way he kissed me. It's kind of interesting. But I wasn't going to marry him, and I wasn't going to ruin his marriage, and he wasn't going to ruin my life. So that was that. I have to tell you one story. Years after we did 4 films together, and in those days, you were there you were 7 days a week, from Monday through Saturday. I'm there at 7 in the morning, I'm on the set at 9, I'm through at 6, and I'm back at the studio at 7 in the morning. What a life, really. Anyway, years later, I'm now married a second time very happily, and Bill has divorced his wife and married somebody else and divorced that. And he was coming back from Europe, and Alan Livingston and I were on our way to Europe. And we got at JFK, and we got off our plane, and we were running down a hall to get to the next flight to London. And all of a sudden, I heard this voice, Alan, down the hall in the other direction, saying, Nancy. male voice. I turn around. I said, Bill! And the two of us ran toward each other. We had not seen each other for a couple of years. And we read about each other. And we hugged and kissed and held each other and laughed. He said, oh my God, how are you? Are you finally happily married? And I said, all of a sudden, a man walked by, tapped us on the shoulder, and he said, excuse me, I just have to tell you something. This is better than watching an old movie. That is a true story. And when I read about Bill's death, I wept. He was a part of my life, a segment of my life that was part of my growing up, part of my discovery of the world, and he contributed to it, there's no question.
That after being in Hollywood since 1939, but what was fascinating to me was how Gloria Swanson, who really was in a certain way playing herself, not her personality, but from that era, and they actually show a clip of one of her silent films. And I remember you saying that she was the one that really knew that this was going to take off. Talk a little about Gloria.
Well, but I didn't know who Gloria Swanson was, and I thought, it's starring who? Gloria Swanson? And I asked my mother, and she explained to me who Gloria Swanson was. But she was the perfect example of somebody who was vulnerable, but beautiful, and gifted, talented, made larger than life, and thrown away. And she got to be in her late 30s. And this is something, by the way, that I really got when I did Sunset Boulevard, and I thought, this is never going to happen to me. I'm going to have a different life than this. But Gloria understood what the film was about.
Oh, yeah.
And so she was the one that, she had a secret. She knew that she would never be forgotten ever again, because she understood the incredible excellence of this film, that it was going to live, and therefore she was going to live. She would never be thrown away again. So she had an understanding about the film that none of us ever truly understood until years after it was released.
And of course, the Eric von Stroheim. I mean, his career also dated back to that era, but he did have that kind of Prussian Kaiser image mentality. And did he maintain that on the set?
Oh, absolutely. He was so formal. First of all, he'd been an incredible success as a screen director.
Correct.
From the very early days. And we all had chairs with our name on the back. And he had Eric von Stroheim. And in the morning, he'd come in his butler's uniform. And he would say very formally to me, "Good morning, Miss Olson." And I would say, Good morning, Mr. von Stroheim. And he would sit as close as he could to the camera to watch Bill, because he wanted to know what was Bill's genius about making these very special films, and Billy Wilder. And so and I often wondered if it made Billy kind of uncomfortable, to be watched so closely. But he was very formal, and he was very, very absolutely on tune every time he spoke in any line in that film. He plays that part wonderfully.
Billy, how was he as a director? I mean, did he just let the actors have their head, or when he wanted something, would he take you aside? How did he direct Billy Wilder?
There's one thing that Billy did that I have a certain criticism, but negative feeling about. And that is because he never wanted to reshoot a film. He would rehearse. All the angles, every movement of the camera, and the actor. But once he said, no, not print, action, excuse me. He'd say action, and away we go. And then it was cut, print. And the first scene that I did, I remember the blouse I wore because I wore it in college all the time. Anyway, I wanted to do it again. And you know, Shirley MacLaine and I used to talk about this because she worked with Billy. And she said, I wanted to reshoot the scene. I knew that I'd missed something. And he absolutely refused. He wanted to, unless somebody fell down and he had to start over, of course. But it was, I didn't quite understand it. But once I did understand it, I knew I better be prepared the first time, because there wouldn't be a second.
One of the things in your book that the play, My Fair Lady, written by husband number one, you were my fair lady. She was my fair lady, correct?
Well, not really. But there is a story in the book, and it's a true story. First of all, Alan Lerner had written, when I met, he'd already written Brigadoon when I married him. Brigadoon is just an absolutely beautiful piece of art. And then he did Paint Your Wagon when we were married. He did a movie called Royal Wedding with an original score with Burton Lane. And he went back to Fred's and did My Fair Lady, Gigi, which is a masterpiece of film. And then he was beginning Camelot when we were divorced. And we have 2 children that are fabulous, 2 daughters. And then I got married again to Alan Livingston, and I have a fabulous son, Christopher Livingston, who's here tonight taking care of me. Thank you, Chris. This is a fabulous young man. But all my children are, I have to tell you. Alan Lerner worked at home, and Frederick Lowe, the writing partner who wrote the music, would come when Alan asked him to, because he had the moment to write a song, and he had the title, and he was ready to go. Anyway, he buzzed me one afternoon. We had this apartment, and his studio was just below his dressing room, and down a kind of winding staircase. And he buzzed me, and I came down the stairs, and he said, Nancy, he said, I am stuck. I am at the end of My Fair Lady, and I'm writing George Bernard Shaw's script, and he will not allow Higgins to be in love with Eliza. I know that Higgins is in love with Eliza. I have to write a love song that isn't a love song. And I looked at him and I said, well, would you like a cup of tea? And he said, great idea. So I ran up the winding staircase and I put the tea tray together and I came down the stairs, because part of the stair was winding, but it was open with a railing on just one side. So I'm being very careful. And he's watching me come down the stairs and he said, Nancy, you know something? You really are a very pretty girl. I said, really? And I put down the tray. Boom. I said, you know, we've been married for 5.5 years. You're with me morning, noon, and night. I said, you just noticed. And he said, for God's sake, come on. He said, I've become He said, don't move. Anyway, ran to his desk, and now we with this little tiny script. I've grown accustomed to this. I picked up the tray, left him. The doorbell rang at 6 o'clock, and it was the doorman saying that Mr. Lowe is coming up. I answered the door, and I said, he said, I've been summoned, and I've been invited for dinner. I said, I know. I said, I've already set a place. And he went down into the studio. They worked until dinner time. They talked, they went back to, and finally Fritz left about 11 o'clock at night, and he said, conception has taken place. That's what he always said. So then the next night, Alan is working all day long, down in the studio, comes up, we send a tray down for lunch, that's it. And now the doorbell rings at 10 o'clock. And he said, I've been summoned. And he went down into the studio, and about 12:15, they buzzed me. And I had put on my robe and slippers, and I walked down the stairs, and they had a little chair all set. And there was the grand piano with Fritz at the keyboard. He was a fabulous pianist. And Alan was standing in the curve of the piano, and they sang to me, I've grown accustomed to her face. And it is possibly the most extraordinary moment of my entire marriage to Alan. That the song was so beautiful and so moving, and I've never heard it sung or played as I heard it that night.
I think one point to make about Nancy's book is the segments of her life, and particularly the unmovie or the non-movie part of her life, and just the people that she knew and associated with. And I know we're running out of time, but just as a sweetener for those who haven't bought the book and need to, John F. Kennedy.
Well, yes, I recently, I met Jack Kennedy. I was invited to dinner at Charlie Feldman's, who ran the agency that I was a member of, but I really had never met him, but I was invited to dinner, and there was Joan Crawford, Charlie Feldman, and a young man, his house guest. And he kind of shuffled in after Mr. Feldman, and I shook Mr. Feldman's hand and introduced myself, and he was cordial and asked me to sit down, and he introduced me. He said, this is Jack. And Jack sat next to me, and I asked Jack, what are you doing? And he said, I'm a congressman. I said, really? What state? And he said, Massachusetts. I said, I always wanted to visit Massachusetts. What are you, a Democrat or a Republican? He said, I'm a Democrat. So am I said. Anyway, this was the beginning. And something happened that night. And you've read and heard about Jack and his pursuit of women. Well, I experienced it. And I write about it. Now, as I write, virgins have amazing strength. And he did not, of course, I pushed him away. But we, interestingly enough, the rest of the evening was kind of gave us a bond, and it's interesting. And we kept in touch with each other. I knew Jackie and Jack socially in New York when I was married to Alan Lerner. Alan Lerner went to Choate and Harvard, although Jack was a year ahead. And we were invited to their wedding, and we didn't go because I just had Jenny, my second daughter, and it just was too much trouble to go to Boston, and I didn't save the invitation. Anyway, and I I was at Joe Alsop's house the night he was inaugurated. I was at the inauguration. I attended all the parties and the dinners and the lunches and the God knows what. And then I went with a small group to all the balls, and we all, very small group, ended up at Joe's house. And I was going through the hall and helping people in the kitchen get something, and we lit a fire, opened some wine and brandy, and there was this pounding on the door after the balls. And I said, hey, somebody's at the door. And they said, Nancy, open it. And so it was snowing and icy, and I pulled the door open, and there was Jack. No coat, no hat, no Secret Service, just 2 limousines down at the curb. That's it. Balls were over. Jackie had gone back to the White House. And he said, good evening, Nancy. And he took my hand and came in. And he sat in front of the fire, which I'd written about, and talked to us about what he was thinking and what the day was like for him. Anyway, it's those kind of stories that are going to be woven through the book.
Yeah.
It will make it more interesting.
I think I could sit here with Nancy indefinitely and just listen, but we have to show, we have to run, in my opinion, the greatest movie ever made about Hollywood, and one that